before we begin tonight's journey, I need to tell you something that might sound impossible. Something that, when historians first discovered it, they thought had to be a mistake. But the evidence is overwhelming, scattered through medieval texts and artwork, and the skeletal remains of people who lived 7, 8, 900 years ago. Medieval people, your ancestors, if you trace your lineage back far enough, didn't sleep lying down, not the way you do, not flat and horizontal through the night. They slept sitting up, propped against pillows and headboards. Some even slept standing, leaning against walls or furniture, their bodies upright to the long, dark hours. And here's what makes this truly fascinating, what kept me awake researching this for months. It changed their bodies, actually, physically changed them in ways that skeletal analysis can still detect today. Change their spines, their lungs, their hearts, the very architecture of their physical form. But more than that, and this is what I'm going to reveal to you slowly over the next hour and a half, it was connected to their deepest fears, to beliefs about death and demons and the fragile boundary between sleeping and dying, to a psychological reality so different from ours that it's almost impossible to imagine. Almost. Tonight, I'm going to take you into the medieval bedroom, into the minds and bodies of people who lived in ways we've completely forgotten. And along the way, I'm going to tell you something about your own sleep, your own body, your own relationship with rest that might surprise you, that might even help you sleep better tonight than you have in years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. There's a specific reason they slept sitting up, a reason rooted in medicine and superstition and genuine terror. And if you stay with me, if you let this story unfold in its own time, I promise you'll understand something profound about what it means to rest, to surrender consciousness, to trust the darkness. There's also a practical technique I'll share near the end. Something the medieval people discovered accidentally that modern sleep science has recently validated. A simple position adjustment that might solve a sleep problem you didn't even know you had. But we'll get there. Patience. First, let's prepare you for the journey. Find your most comfortable position. And notice I said comfortable, not correct. Because one of the things you're about to learn is that there's no single right way to sleep. Your body is wiser than any rule, any guideline, any expert advice. So honor what your body actually wants right now. Shift onto your side if that feels good. Stay on your back if you prefer. Even, and yes, I'm serious, try sitting up slightly against your pillows if you're curious about how it might feel. Your medieval ancestors would have found our flat sleeping position strange, even dangerous. And they weren't entirely wrong, as you'll soon discover. Good. Now, dim the lights around you if you haven't already. Let the world soften into that gentle twilight that the medieval people knew intimately, that hour between day and night when the boundaries blur and reality becomes more permeable. Take a deep breath with me. In through your nose slowly, filling your lungs the way a medieval person would have. Sitting propped against pillows, their chests expanded, their airways open in ways that lying flat never quite allows, and out through your mouth, releasing the modern world, releasing the need to understand everything immediately, releasing into the mystery. Again, in and out. Your breath is different depending on your position. You know, the medieval people understood this intuitively. When you're upright, your lungs have more room. Your diaphragm can move more freely. Your heart sits in a different relationship to the rest of your body. Everything changes. Everything. And tonight, as I tell you why they slept the way they did, as I reveal the physical consequences and the psychological drivers and the strange wisdom hidden in their unusual practices, you might find yourself experimenting, shifting, discovering that your body has knowledge your conscious mind doesn't. So settle in now. Let your breathing find its natural rhythm. Let your muscles release. We have all night. We have centuries to explore. And by the end of this journey, I think you'll never look at sleep quite the same way again. I think you'll understand something about your own rest that you've been missing. And I hope, you'll sleep more deeply tonight than you have in a very long time. Let's begin. Let's step back through time into the medieval bedroom and discover why an entire civilization chose to sleep in a way that seems so strange to us now. The answer will surprise you, and it might just change your life. It's sometime around 1350 CE. We're in a moderately wealthy household in England, not nobility, but comfortable merchant class. The kind of people who had resources but weren't living in castles. The bedroom we're entering is smaller than you'd expect. Dark, the walls are thick stone, and there are heavy tapestries hanging to block drafts. A single window with shutters, closed now against the night. And in the center of the room, dominating the space, is the bed. But this bed is nothing like yours. It's massive, a wooden frame as tall as a person, with a canopy overhead and heavy curtains that can be drawn completely closed, creating a room within a room. And the mattress, stuffed with straw and feathers layered thick, is tilted, not flat, actually angled, with the head elevated significantly higher than the feet. And piled against the headboard are pillows. So many pillows, stacked and arranged in a careful slope, creating what amounts to a reclining chair more than a bed. Let's meet someone who sleeps here. We'll call her Marjorie, a woman in her 40s, the wife of a wool merchant, mother of 5 children, 3 of whom survived past infancy. She's preparing for bed now, and we're going to watch her carefully because every detail matters. Every choice she makes is connected to beliefs and practices that made perfect sense in her world but seem bizarre in ours. Marjorie removes her outer clothing, the heavy woolen dress she wore through the day, but she doesn't undress completely. She keeps on her linen shift, a long garment that will stay on her body through the night. Medieval people rarely slept naked. The night air was considered dangerous, potentially disease-carrying. Covering the body was protection. She washes her face and hands in a basin of water, cold water, because heating it would require keeping the fire going late, and fuel is expensive. The shock of cold water on her skin is bracing, alerting, and she welcomes it. She wants to be conscious and aware as she prepares for the dangerous transition into sleep. Yes, dangerous. Remember that word. We'll come back to it. She says her evening prayers, kneeling beside the bed. Not quick prayers, but lengthy ones, invoking protection of multiple saints, asking for a safe passage through the night, begging that she might wake again in the morning. These aren't just formalities. She means them with desperate sincerity. Then she climbs into the bed, but watch carefully how she positions herself. She doesn't lie down flat. Instead, she arranges herself sitting up, back propped against a stack of pillows, legs extended but knees slightly bent. Her torso is at perhaps a 45-degree angle to the mattress, almost like she's reclining in a comfortable chair. Her husband joins her, positioning himself similarly on the other side of the bed. They pull the heavy curtains closed, creating a dark, enclosed space. In winter, these curtains will trap their body heat, creating a warm pocket against a freezing room. But even in summer, they're drawn because the curtains serve another purpose beyond warmth: protection. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Here's where we start to understand why they slept this way. Marjorie believes, truly, genuinely believes, that lying flat makes you vulnerable to demons, to evil spirits that prowl the night, to something called the mare, a malevolent entity that sits on your chest while you sleep, causing nightmares and potentially suffocating you. And she believes that lying flat resembles the position of death, that horizontal sleep is too much like the corpse in the coffin, and that this resemblance might confuse the boundary between sleeping and dying, might invite death to take you while you're vulnerable and unconscious. So she sleeps sitting up, clearly alive, clearly different from a corpse. alert even in rest. And there's more. There's a medical theory, widely accepted in medieval Europe, that says the body contains four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that these humors need to flow properly for health. Lying flat, they believe, causes the humors to stagnate, to pool in dangerous ways, to create illness. But sitting up allows the humors to circulate, keeps the body systems flowing, prevents the dangerous accumulation of fluids and vapors that lead to disease and death. Is this true? Medically accurate? Well, yes and no. And that's what makes it so fascinating. Let me tell you what actually happens to a body that sleeps sitting up for years, for decades, for a lifetime. Your spine develops differently. The vertebrae in your lower back experience less compression, but more constant tension. Over time, this creates a particular pattern of where that skeletal analyst can identify in medieval remains. A signature written in bone that says, "This person slept sitting up." Your lungs expand more fully in this position, especially if you have any respiratory condition. And most medieval people did, living in smoky, poorly ventilated homes. Sleeping upright can be dramatically more comfortable. You breathe easier. You cough less. The fluid that would pool in your lungs when lying flat drains away when you're elevated. Your heart works differently too. The cardiovascular system doesn't have to fight against gravity in quite the same way. For people with heart conditions, again, common in the medieval period, sleeping upright could mean the difference between restful sleep and terrifying breathlessness. And here's something modern sleep science has recently discovered. Sleeping in a slightly elevated position can reduce acid reflux, can help with sinus drainage, can even improve certain types of sleep apnea. So the medieval people, for all their talk of humors and demons and the dangers of looking like a corpse, were they entirely wrong? Or did they stumble onto something real? Something that their superstitions and medical theories helped them rationalize, but that had genuine physical benefits? Watch Marjorie now as she settles into sleep. Her breathing slows. Her body relaxes against the pillows. But even in sleep, she maintains that upright position, trained by years of practice to rest without fully reclining. And something fascinating happens. Something you can feel in your own body right now if you're paying attention. In this position, she doesn't sleep as deeply as she would lying flat. The sleep is lighter, more vigilant. She wakes more easily at sounds or disturbances, which in a medieval household, where fire is a constant danger, where infant children might need attention, where animals and strangers and genuine threats lurk in the night, is actually adaptive, useful. She's sleeping, yes. Resting, yes. But not surrendering completely. Not becoming utterly vulnerable and unconscious the way we do in our modern, safe bedrooms with our locks and alarms and belief that the night holds no real dangers. She's practicing what we might call defensive sleeping, guarded rest, sleep that keeps one metaphorical eye open. And this, more than anything else, reveals the medieval relationship with sleep. They didn't trust it, didn't feel entirely safe surrendering consciousness. Sleep was necessary, yes, but it was also dangerous. A liminal state where anything might happen, where demons might attack, where death might slip in unnoticed. So they protected themselves with prayers and curtains and blessed herbs tucked into their pillows. And with this upright position that kept them just slightly less unconscious, just slightly more ready to wake and defend themselves or their families if needed. Hours pass. Marjorie sleeps, but not peacefully. She wakes several times through the night. This is normal for medieval sleep, expected even. The long night is broken into segments of sleep interrupted by periods of wakefulness that they call the watch. During these wakeful periods, while sitting propped in her bed, curtains still drawn, Marjorie might pray, or think, or talk quietly with her husband, or attend to bodily needs. This segmented sleep, This pattern of sleeping and waking and sleeping again was considered natural, healthy even. The idea of sleeping straight through the night for 8 unbroken hours? That would have seemed strange to her, impossible, even undesirable. And modern sleep science has discovered something remarkable. This segmented sleep pattern might actually be more natural for humans than the consolidated sleep we're told to pursue. When people are removed from artificial light and allowed to sleep according to their body's own rhythms, many naturally fall into this pattern of first sleep, watch, and second sleep. So again, the medieval people, with their sitting position and their segmented nights and their belief that continuous sleep is unnatural, were they entirely wrong? Or did they understand something we've forgotten? As dawn approaches, Marjorie's sleep grows lighter. She wakes naturally as the first hint of gray light seeps through the shutters. She's been sitting semi-upright all night, and now she unfurls herself carefully. Her back is slightly stiff. It always is, but not painfully so. This is what her body knows. This is how she's always slept. She survived the night. The demons didn't take her. Death didn't slip in while she was vulnerable. The dangerous hours of darkness have passed, and she's here, awake, alive, ready to face another day. And because she slept this way, because her airways were open and her breathing easy and her body positioned for maximum alertness, she actually rests reasonably well. Not perfectly, not by our modern standards, but well enough, functionally well. She doesn't know that 700 years later, people will sleep lying flat in temperature-controlled rooms with no curtains and no fear of demons. She doesn't know that her way of sleeping will seem bizarre, will require explanation, will become a historical curiosity. She just knows this works for her body, for her fears, for her world, and maybe, just maybe, there's something we can learn from her. Now, let me take you deeper into why medieval people believed what they believed about sleep positions. Because it's not just superstition. It's not just a rational fear. There's a logic here, a medical theory that made perfect sense given what they knew, and that contains more truth than you might expect. The medieval understanding of the body was based on the theory of the 4 humors, inherited from ancient Greek medicine and elaborated by Islamic scholars and European physicians. And while modern medicine has moved far beyond this framework, there are echoes of truth in it that are genuinely startling. Let me explain. The 4 humors were believed to be fluids in the body. Blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health required these 4 fluids to be in proper balance. Illness occurred when one humor became excessive or deficient. And here's the key. These humors were thought to be subject to gravity, to flow and pool and stagnate depending on the body's position. Lying flat, according to medieval physicians, allowed the phlegm, the cold, moist humor associated with the lungs and brain, to settle in the chest and throat. This would cause breathing difficulties, create a breeding ground for respiratory illness, and potentially even drown a person in their own fluids. Is this medically accurate? Well, sort of. Modern medicine doesn't believe in humors, obviously, but we do understand that body position affects fluid distribution. When you lie flat, fluids in your body do indeed pool differently than when you're upright. This is simple physics. Gravity works. If you have any kind of congestive condition, heart failure, pulmonary edema, even just a bad cold, lying flat can make breathing dramatically harder. Fluid accumulates in the lungs. Airways narrow. You wake up gasping, struggling for air, terrified. Medieval people didn't understand the mechanism. They didn't know about capillary pressure and lymphatic drainage, and the cardiovascular system's complex response to positional changes. But they observed the effect. They noticed that sick people often breathed easier sitting up, that people with chest complaints slept better propped on pillows. And they developed a theory, the theory of humor settling, that explained what they observed. It was wrong in its details, but right in its practical application. Sleeping sitting up does help with many respiratory conditions, does reduce the work the heart has to do to circulate blood, does keep airways clearer and breathing easier. So when a medieval physician told you to sleep propped up to prevent the stagnation of phlegm, he was giving you genuinely useful advice, even though his explanation for why it worked was based on a medical theory we now know is false. This happens more often than you might think in medical history. Practices that work for reasons we don't yet understand. Theories that are wrong, but that lead to right actions. But there's another layer to this. Another reason the medieval people slept sitting up, and this one is more psychological than medical. They believed that sleep resembles death. And they weren't wrong about that either. Think about it. When you sleep, you lose consciousness. Your breathing slows. Your heart rate drops. Your body becomes still and unresponsive. For all practical purposes, you resemble a corpse. The only difference is that you wake up again. But what if you didn't? What if one night, the transition from sleep to death was seamless? What if you simply didn't wake up? This terrified medieval people. Genuinely, deeply terrified them, because death was everywhere in their world. Sudden, unpredictable, always lurking. People died from diseases we now cure with antibiotics, from infections that started with minor injuries, from childbirth and malnutrition and simple accidents. And often people died in their sleep, went to bed healthy or relatively healthy, and simply didn't wake up. So the boundary between sleep and death felt dangerously thin. And anything that made you look more like a corpse, like lying flat, arms at your sides, the classic burial position, seemed to invite death to take you. Sleeping sitting up was a way of declaring, I am alive. I am not dead. I am resting, yes, but I am vigilant. I am not surrendering completely. And psychologically, this probably did help. Not because demons care about your sleep position, but because feeling that you're taking precautions against death reduces anxiety, allows you to relax into sleep instead of fighting against it. Here's something I find fascinating. Modern sleep science tells us that anxiety is one of the primary causes of insomnia, that if you're afraid of sleep, if you associate your bed with danger or death or loss of control, you will struggle to sleep well. The medieval people were afraid of sleep. Rationally, given their world, they had good reasons to be. So they developed practices, prayers, blessed herbs, protective curtains, and yes, sleeping positions that felt safer, that helped manage that fear. Did sitting up actually protect them from death? Of course not. People died in their sleep, regardless of position. But did believing it helped reduce their anxiety enough that they could actually rest? Probably yes. This is a placebo effect, in a way, but calling it just a placebo misses something important. If a practice genuinely helps you feel safer, if it genuinely reduces your anxiety and allows you to rest, then it's working. The mechanism doesn't matter as much as the outcome. You do this too, whether you realize it or not. You probably have your own sleep rituals, your own ways of making the bed feel safe. Maybe you check the locks before bed. Maybe you have a particular blanket that helps you feel secure. Maybe you position your pillows in a specific way. These aren't superstitions. They're psychological tools. Ways of managing the inherent vulnerability of sleep, of surrendering consciousness in a world that can feel threatening. The medieval people just did it more explicitly, more consciously, and with practices that seem strange to us but that serve the same fundamental purpose. There's one more medical belief that drove the sitting sleep position, and this one is both darkest and most interesting. Medieval physicians believed that during sleep, the soul partially leaves the body, that consciousness doesn't just dim but actually departs, traveling to the realm of dreams while the body lies empty and vulnerable. And an empty body, they thought, is susceptible to invasion, not just by demons, but by disease, by malign influences, by the many invisible threats that fill the air and darkness. Sitting up remaining partially conscious, keeping the soul more anchored to body through lighter sleep. This was protection, insurance that you wouldn't be entirely vacant during the night's dangerous hours. Now, we don't believe the soul literally leaves during sleep, but recent neuroscience has discovered something remarkably similar. During REM sleep, the brain's default mode network, the part of the brain that maintains your sense of self, your continuous narrative identity, actually does partially shut down. Your sense of being a coherent, you fragments during dreams. You become a character in your own dream, rather than the conscious author of your experience. In a very real sense, the you that exists during waking does temporarily depart during deep sleep. The medieval people didn't have brain scanners, didn't know about the default mode network or REM sleep or neural correlates of consciousness, but they intuited something true. Sleep involves a genuine change in selfhood, a partial dissolution of the waking self. And if you're afraid of that dissolution, if you want to maintain more continuity of self through the night, then sleeping lighter, which sitting up encourages, makes sense. You don't disappear as completely. Don't fragment as thoroughly. Maintain more of a thread of awareness through the dark hours. Is this healthier? Probably not by modern standards. We need that deep sleep, that full dissolution, for optimal rest and memory consolidation and emotional processing. But for a medieval person living in a world of genuine threats, where being able to wake quickly could save your life or your family's lives, where sleep felt dangerous and death felt close, maintaining lighter sleep might have been adaptive, useful, worth the trade-off. So here's what we've learned so far. The medieval practice of sleeping sitting up was based on theories about humors and demons, and the soul's departure that we now know are false or metaphorical. But the practice itself actually had real benefits for respiratory health, cardiovascular function, and anxiety management. Helped people with medical conditions breathe easier. Helped fearful people feel safer. Create a style of sleep that matched their world's actual demands. They were wrong about why it worked, but right that it worked. And maybe, just maybe, we could learn something from this. Not about humors or demons, but about the relationship between belief and practice, between fear and safety, between the stories we tell ourselves and the rest we actually get. Because you have your own fears about sleep, your own anxieties about vulnerability and loss of control, and what might happen in the dark. Everyone does. And the question isn't whether those fears are rational. The question is, what practices help you manage them? What rituals and positions and preparations allow you to feel safe enough to rest? The medieval people found their answer in sitting up, in prayers, in heavy curtains and bless herbs. What's yours? Now, let me tell you something that archaeologists discovered when they started examining medieval skeletal remains carefully. Something that proves, beyond any doubt, that widespread sitting sleep was real and had measurable physical consequences. The bones remember, the body keeps the score, and medieval spines tell a story. I'm going to walk you through what happens to a human body that sleeps sitting up for decades. Not occasionally, not when sick, but as a regular practice from childhood through old age. The changes are subtle but unmistakable once you know what to look for. First, the spine. Your spine is a remarkable structure, a stack of bones separated by cushioning discs that compress during the day when you're upright and bearing weight, then expand and rehydrate at night when you lie down and the pressure is released. This compression and decompression cycle is important. It's how your discs get nutrients. They don't have a direct blood supply, so they rely on this pumping action. Fluids being squeezed out under pressure and drawn back in when pressure is released. But if you sleep sitting up, you never fully release that pressure. You reduce it, yes, but you don't eliminate it. Your spine remains in a load-bearing position even during rest. Over years, over decades, this creates a specific pattern. The discs in your lower back compress more permanently. The vertebrae develop stress patterns in particular locations. The curvature of your spine adjusts to spending most of its time in the semi-upright position. Archaeologists examining medieval skeletons, particularly from the period between 1200 and 1500 CE, when sitting sleep was most common, find these patterns consistently. The lower lumbar vertebrae show a specific type of wear. The disc spaces are narrower than in populations that sleep flat. The bone density distribution is different. It's a signature, a proof written in calcium and collagen that these people spent their sleeping hours in position we no longer use. Is this damage? Not exactly. It's adaptation. The body is extraordinarily good at adapting to whatever demands you place on it. If you sleep sitting up from childhood, your spine learns this pattern, develops to accommodate it, creates a new normal. Medieval people with these spinal patterns didn't necessarily have more back pain than we do. They had different back pain in different locations from different causes, but their bodies worked, functioned, carried them through their lives, just differently. And here's something fascinating. Some modern populations that still practice elevated sleeping, certain communities in Asia and Africa where cultural or practical factors lead to sleeping on raised platforms or in semi-upright positions, show similar skeletal patterns. The sitting sleep signature appears across cultures and centuries wherever this practice exists. It's real, it's measurable. It's proof that how you position your body during sleep has long-term structural consequences. But the spine isn't the only thing affected. Let's talk about the lungs. Your lungs are positioned in your chest cavity in a way that's affected by gravity. When you're upright, they hang somewhat differently than when you're horizontal. The lower lobes have more blood flow when you're lying down, but the upper lobes expand more fully when you're sitting up. Over time, if you consistently sleep in an elevated position, your lung tissue adapts. You develop slightly greater capacity in the upper lobes, slightly different elasticity in the lower lobes. Your breathing mechanics shift to optimize for the position you spend most time in. Medieval people, especially those living in cities with poor air quality or those who worked around smoke and dust and occupational pollutants, often developed respiratory conditions, chronic bronchitis, early emphysema, lung scarring from repeated infections. For these people, sleeping sitting up wasn't just more comfortable, it was genuinely therapeutic, allowed them to breathe through the night instead of waking repeatedly in respiratory distress. And their lungs adapted to this pattern, developing in ways that supported upright breathing more efficiently than they would have otherwise. Again, this isn't damage. It's the body being brilliant, being adaptive, creating the best possible function within the constraints it's given. The heart changes too, not structurally usually, but functionally. The cardiovascular system learns the positional demands you place on it. When you sleep lying flat, your heart doesn't have to work against gravity to circulate blood to your brain. It's an easy pump, relatively speaking, but you do get more blood pooling in your lungs, more pressure on the pulmonary circulation, which can be problematic if you have certain heart conditions. When you sleep sitting up, your heart has to work slightly harder to get blood to your brain. You're asking it to pump uphill, but the pulmonary circulation has an easier time. Less blood pools in the lungs, less pressure on the right side of the heart. Medieval people with congestive heart failure, which was common, often related to rheumatic fever from childhood strep infections, would have found sitting sleep dramatically more comfortable, would have slept better, breathed easier, woken less frequently in panic. And over time, their cardiovascular systems would have adapted, becoming more efficient at the upright circulation they practiced every night. The body is so smart, you see, so extraordinarily good at working with whatever you give it, making the best of the conditions it's placed in. Medieval bodies weren't broken by sitting sleep. They were shaped by it, adapted to it, made it work. There's one more physical consequence I want to tell you about, and this one surprised researchers when they discovered it. Medieval people who slept sitting up had different patterns of sleep apnea than modern populations. Sleep apnea, the temporary cessation of breathing during sleep, is extraordinarily common today. Millions of people stop breathing repeatedly through night, often without knowing it, leading to poor sleep quality, daytime fatigue, and serious long-term health consequences. One of the primary treatments for sleep apnea? Sleeping in an elevated position, literally the medieval approach, rediscovered by modern medicine. When you're elevated, your airway is less likely to collapse. The soft tissues of your throat don't fall backward as easily. Gravity works with you instead of against you. So medieval people who slept sitting up would have had lower rates of certain types of sleep apnea than modern people sleeping flat. Their sleep might have been lighter, yes, but it was also less interrupted by breathing cessations. Another trade-off, another way in which their seemingly strange practice had hidden benefits. The question isn't whether sitting sleep is better than lying flat. It's not that simple. The answer is, better for what? Better for whom? Better in what context? For a medieval person with heart disease or respiratory problems, living in a world where sleep felt dangerous and vigilance was adaptive, sitting sleep might have been genuinely optimal. For a modern person in a safe environment with access to medical treatment and without chronic cardiopulmonary issues, lying flat probably allows for deeper, more restorative rest. Context matters. Individual variation matters. There's no universal right answer, only right answers for specific people in specific situations. And here's what I find most beautiful about this. The medieval body, shaped by sitting sleep, wasn't inferior to yours, wasn't damaged or broken, or doing it wrong. It was adapted, optimized for a different world with different demands. Brilliantly, elegantly adapted. Your body is doing the same thing. Right now, adapting to how you sleep, how you move, what demands you place on it, creating the best possible function within the life you're actually living. It's extraordinary when you think about it. This body of yours, this remarkable biological system, constantly learning, constantly adjusting, constantly trying to give you what you need. Maybe we should trust it more, listen to it more, honor what it's telling us about what position feels right, what amount of sleep we actually need, what rituals and preparations help us rest. The medieval people didn't have all the answers, but they listened to their bodies, developed practices that worked for their specific context, adapted, and you can do the same. So here we are, having traveled through medieval bedrooms and medical theories and skeletal evidence, having understood why an entire civilization chose to sleep in a way that seems bizarre to us. Now, let me tell you what modern sleep science is slowly, reluctantly rediscovering. That maybe, just maybe, we've lost something important in our flat sleeping, our consolidated 8-hour blocks, our one-size-fits-all approach to rest. Over the past few decades, researchers have been studying what happens when you remove people from artificial light and rigid schedules. When you let them sleep according to their body's actual rhythms rather than the rhythms imposed by work and school and alarm clocks. And what they've discovered is fascinating. The 8-hour consolidated sleep block that we think of as natural, it's not. It's a modern invention created by the Industrial Revolution's need for synchronized work schedules. When left to their own devices, many people naturally fall into a biphasic sleep pattern. They sleep for 3 or 4 hours, wake for an hour or two, then sleep again for another 3 or 4 hours. Sound familiar? It's exactly the medieval pattern of first sleep, watch, and second sleep, the pattern that European societies practiced for centuries before electricity and factory work schedules disrupted it. The pattern we thought was inefficient or dysfunctional turns out to be natural. For many people, anyway, and that hour or two of wakefulness in the middle of the night, medieval people used it for prayer, quiet reflection, intimate conversation, creative work. Some of history's most profound insights and artistic breakthroughs happened during the watch. We've lost that. We lie awake at 3 a.m. and call it insomnia. Treat it as a problem, stress about it, which makes it worse. But what if we reframed it? What if midnight waking isn't disorder, but a natural pattern that many bodies want to follow? And then there's a position question. The sitting up versus lying flat debate that seems settled, but maybe isn't. Modern sleep science recommends sleeping flat for most people. And for most people, in most situations, this is probably right. Flat sleeping allows for deeper unconsciousness, more REM sleep, better memory consolidation. But there are significant exceptions. And some of these exceptions are becoming more common as modern health issues change. Acid reflux disease? Sleeping elevated helps dramatically. GERD sufferers have known this for years, often independently discovering the medieval solution of piling up pillows. Sleep apnea? Elevation helps many people, reducing airway collapse and breathing interruptions. Congestive heart failure? Patients often sleep better sitting up, and hospitals regularly use elevated beds for cardiac patients. Sinus problems? Elevation helps drainage, reduces morning congestion and headaches. Even late pregnancy, many women find sleeping semi-upright more comfortable as their growing belly makes lying flat difficult. The medieval sitting sleep position is being rediscovered piece by piece by modern medicine, not as a universal recommendation, but as a targeted intervention for specific conditions. We're learning that position matters. That one size doesn't fit all. That individual variation is real and important. But here's what's really interesting. Even beyond these medical conditions, some people just sleep better elevated, not because they have a diagnosed disorder, but because their bodies prefer it. Maybe they have mild reflux they're not aware of. Maybe their cardiovascular system works more efficiently with less pulmonary blood pooling. Maybe they simply feel safer and less vulnerable in a more upright position. And modern sleep advice, sleep flat, 8 hours straight, deep unconsciousness, doesn't work for them. Makes them feel broken when they're not. They're just different, like the medieval people were different, adapted to different circumstances, different bodies, different needs. And this brings us to the practical wisdom I promised at the beginning. The thing you can try tonight if you want. If you struggle with sleep, if you wake frequently, if you feel anxious lying flat, if you have any of those conditions I mentioned, or if you're just curious, try elevating yourself slightly. Not sitting bolt upright like a medieval merchant, but just angled, head and torso raised 20 or 30 degrees. You can use pillows or a wedge pillow, or even just adjust the head of your bed if it's adjustable. See how it feels. Not for one night, but for several. Give your body time to adjust, to remember this older pattern. You might discover that you breathe easier, sleep lighter, but wake feeling more rested, have fewer disturbances, feel safer and more relaxed. Or you might discover that it doesn't work for you, that your body prefers lying flat. And that's fine too. That's valuable information. The point isn't that elevation is universally better. The point is that you have options, that the medieval people weren't crazy or wrong, that different positions serve different purposes and different bodies. And there's one more piece of medieval wisdom worth reclaiming, the segmented sleep pattern. If you wake in the middle of the night and can't immediately fall back asleep, don't panic. Don't lie there calculating how many hours you have left and stressing about tomorrow. Instead, embrace it. This is the watch. This is your hour. Get up if you want. Read something peaceful. Journal, pray, or meditate if that's your practice. Have a light snack. Talk quietly with a partner. Create something. Just be awake, without judgment, without fear. The medieval people knew this hour was valuable. Use it for things that the busy day didn't allow. Some historians believe that our modern epidemic of anxiety and creative stagnation might be partially related to losing this quiet middle-of-the-night time for reflection and processing. After an hour or so, you'll probably feel sleepy again. Your body will signal that it's ready for the second sleep, and you can return to bed without the anxiety and frustration that often keeps us awake. This is tested. This is proven. This is how humans slept for thousands of years. We don't have to follow medieval practices exactly, but we can learn from their wisdom, can remember that our modern way isn't the only way, can trust our bodies when they tell us they need something different. The medieval people slept sitting up for reasons that made sense in their world, and their bodies adapted, functioned, worked. You sleep lying flat for reasons that make sense in your world, and your body adapts, functions, works. But maybe there's room for flexibility, for experimentation, for honoring what your individual body actually needs rather than forcing yourself into a position or pattern that doesn't quite fit. Maybe the lesson of medieval sleep isn't about the specific position. Maybe it's about the deeper truth that sleep is individual, contextual, adaptive, that what works for one person or one era might not work for another, that our bodies are smarter than our theories, and that listening to your body, trusting its signals, adapting to what it needs, this is wisdom that transcends centuries. And so, our journey through medieval sleep comes to its gentle end. We've walked through the bedrooms of the past, seen the pillows piled high, understood the fears that kept people sitting through the night. We've explored the medical theories, the humors and demons, the beliefs that seemed strange but contained hidden truths. We've examined the physical consequences, the spines that remember, the bodies that adapted and thrive in their own way. And we discovered that maybe we have something to learn from these people who slept so differently, yet slept nonetheless. So tonight, as you find your own rest, in your own way, in your own position, remember that there's no single right way to sleep. The medieval people had their way, you have yours, and your body knows what it needs. If you're comfortable lying flat, then lie flat and rest deeply. But if you're curious, if you struggle, if something in this story resonated with you, try elevating slightly. See how it feels. Trust your body's response. And if you wake in the middle of the night, don't fight it. That's the watch, the quiet hour, the time between sleeps. Use it, honor it, and then when you're ready, return to rest. The medieval people are sleeping now in their sitting positions across the centuries. Their bodies adapted and strong, resting in their own way, and you can rest in yours. Feel yourself settling now into whatever position your body prefers. Let your breathing slow and deepen. Let your muscles release completely. Let your mind drift toward sleep or toward the watch or toward dreams. It doesn't matter which. All are natural, all are valid, all are part of the human experience of rest. You are safe in this night. Your body knows how to rest. Trust it, honor it, let it guide you. The medieval people sleep beside you across time, different positions, different fears, same need for rest. And you can rest now too, in your own way, in your own time. Sleep or wake or drift between. All is well, all is natural, all is as it should be. Rest now, dear friend, however you need to. Sleep